Good morning, and thank you all for coming today. I've met most of you, but not all of you. I'm Mike Silver. I'm the Senior Vice President of Improvement Science and Consulting Services here at HealthInsight. I've been with HealthInsight for just over 20 years, so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So we got what I hope you'll find an interesting morning. We're going to introduce something, a key knowledge program, something that we've just, we're bringing up here at HealthInsight. And I want to give you an overview of that to provide a bigger context, and then we're going to drill down on some particular topics within that. So a little bit of background. Our board has challenged us with a big task. Our ends policy, we have a board of directors, as you know, and they've directed us to make fundamental change in the healthcare system here in Nevada, in Utah, New Mexico, and Oregon, and in fact, we are to influence the healthcare of the nation. So that's going to require changes in a complex health system, but also in all of our relationship with healthcare. Healthcare is going to change, and our relationship with healthcare is going to change with it. So our customers, the people that we work with, are facing big challenges to make that happen. So they demand us to be good at our jobs, to know things that are useful to be able to help with that change. And even our own internal processes, we're being asked to be more efficient in those. So to succeed, so that's a big job, that's a big pull, right? In order to succeed in that, we know, HealthInsight knows, that the only way to do it is through your effort. And because of that, we invest in developing your skills. You're the ones that are going to make it happen. And one form of that investment is this key knowledge program. We want to provide you with knowledge, resources, skills, such that you can be successful working with your clients. The topics that we've identified should be thought of as basically like our core technology at HealthInsight. These are the things, areas of knowledge, skills that we've had success with in the past, and we think they're important, vital for achieving those goals in our future. So, here are the domains that we've identified. Determinants of health, something called lean, quality improvement, something called human factors, systems thinking, health information technology, and consumer and community engagement. I'm going to go through quickly those topics to give you an overview of what to expect, why these have been included. First one, determinants of health, and we'll talk some about this today. So, healthcare system, HealthInsight, see a theme developing here. Health is our purpose of a healthcare system. It's something that we're seeking. It's what our board has charged us with advancing. And to inform that change, to inform our work, we got to understand something about its causes. That's the brief reason. That's a rationale for studying that. Beyond that, the effectiveness of HealthInsight itself depends in some small part, on the health of its staff. If we don't have a healthy staff, we can't make positive change in our community. So that's why we're going to focus on that some. Lean. Lean is a set of tools and thinking processes that are motivated by this observation. The production systems are burdened by inefficiency and waste. They tend to grow that way. And lean is a set of tools that can help systematically eliminate that type of waste. Moreover, our funders, sponsors, our customers, people are expecting that a company like HealthInsight, as a healthcare quality improvement organization, will know something about lean and be able to apply it. Moreover, again, internally, we're being asked to be more efficient. We're being asked to, if you will, do more with less, and our own production systems we can expect are burdened by the same types of inefficiency and waste. So lean are tools to address that. Quality improvement, related set of tools and principles. It's actually very complementary to lean, motivated by the same ideas. Both our customers and our own internal processes will benefit from it. Motivated also by the observation that none of us was born knowing this stuff. So we got to learn it somewhere. And most of us, our training, our background training didn't include these types of things. So we're introducing it here. Even more so with human factors. Healthcare systems, the observation here is that healthcare systems depend on human effort, human behavior, human decision making. That's the raw material that healthcare is made from. And there's a science of design associated with human behavior, human decision making, that sort of thing. So, but that's not the only thing. Those are healthcare, if you will, healthcare providers. The patients themselves also contribute to the success of healthcare outcomes through their behaviors, their actions, their decisions. Human factors can help inform that type of thinking. And also our own internal systems and processes. We are one of the key raw materials of HealthInsight, and the design challenges apply there as well. Systems thinking, did it again, is a way to put these sorts of things together. We're working with fundamentally complex systems, and there's a risk that, well-recognized risk, that people like us, they're charged with making changes in complex systems, and our customers and policymakers and others that we will deal with, there's a risk that we will focus on we'll focus on individuals instead of the system drivers. And I hope to illustrate some of that through the course of today. So some of the drivers, systems that are going to factor into this, we're seeing coming up in terms of alternate payment and performance transparency. Let's take health information technology is obviously a big part of HealthInsight's agenda and strategy for improvement. I think we are in a transition stage where health information technology, we've moved from just adoption to getting to really effective use of that. So we need to learn something about that together. And then finally, and this is kind of a newer area for us, although we have some good experience and growing experience in this. We find that, and we're going to review some of that this morning, the key determinants of health and the effectiveness of the healthcare system are outside of healthcare proper. They're in the community, they're in the individual choices that we make, that sort of thing. So this is an area that we expect to do even more work in the future here at HealthInsight. Consumer and community engagement. So today, a little bit more on the Key Knowledge Program. This is, as I said, this is a newer initiative building off some work that's been going on over years. You can expect in something like this, Key Knowledge, that each of us may experience a progression from what we described as declarative knowledge. That is, that you would be able to know and provide a basic definition, description of what something is. Don't worry if among the list that we just ran through, some of those topics, this would have been the first time that you've ever heard it. That's all right. As I said, none of us was born knowing this stuff. So our first level of skill or competence is to be able to describe what it is. What is this? What is human factors, for example? You'll walk away with that today. And then we can expect to progress. Basic applied competencies so that we recognize what are key principles and we're able to apply it in our own internal work. With some experience, feedback, more learning, we can come to a stage of practicing competency where we can apply it with our customers, clients, that sort of thing. And then, with some more experience, feedback, that sort of thing, we can become experts. We could become an organizational resource where, for example, when we're seeking funding for an initiative, we could point to, here is an expert that we have here at HealthInsight that knows about consumer engagement or community engagement. One could imagine even that each of us could do some kind of self-assessment and say, what do I know about these topics? And one could make a plan for saying, based on what I learned today or what we learned through this program, this is a topic that I want to learn more about. So that I could move from declarative to basic applied, that sort of thing. Again, a reminder, we don't expect anybody here to have come to HealthInsight to walk through the door being expert in all these categories. Good news, right? I've been here 20 years, and have had an opportunity to, had opportunities for learning. I believe I would rate myself an expert on 4 categories. And one of those categories, I got a master's in public health, so I came to HealthInsight with that. So 3 categories I became expert in 20 years. So about how long does it take to become an expert? It takes a while, but it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile, I'm going to suggest to you, it's worthwhile for a couple of reasons. One, it helps HealthInsight, so we're all about that, right? But 2, I'm telling you, at least from my experience, it makes the work more interesting, more fun. If you can bring useful ideas into the dialogue with customers, they're glad to see you. And those interactions themselves are interesting and productive. You feel like you've accomplished something. So I'm just going to encourage you to take advantage of these resources when they're there. I think that I've certainly found it to be uplifting. So what's our challenge? So now I've just advocated for the program, said why we should do it, but we all know that it's tough to find the time. I mean, I really appreciate people carving out the time to take this morning, but we don't have many of these opportunities. So that's one of the challenges. The second challenge, and we've done this time, we've done substantive staff training a number of occasions before. We found that it can be challenging to connect these principles to applied work, and also it is a real challenge to move from knowing something, being able to describe its application, but to really become expert in it. All these sorts of things are challenges that we've recognized. So how are we going to address those sorts of things? We will be developing, in fact, I've got this introduction, although I may replace it with we're videoing this today. So I've got this introduction and something we can load onto eNet. And we'll be developing additional resources that are self-paced, self-study sort of curriculum. So we're gonna be making that available and deliver this in a variety of methods and support modes. One of the things that we're exploring is to integrate learning opportunities not only into staff orientation, but into project work, so that as we're initiating projects, we have opportunities to, when we develop our strategy or our approaches, we have opportunities to review those with peers, with other people who are studying these things and get feedback on that. So those are the types of things we'll be you can expect to see. So how does one become expert? Again, introduction, study, practice, reflection, feedback, performance feedback, and coaching. So the idea here is, just to highlight this, they warned me not to walk out here because I look funny in the video. The idea of performance feedback. If we're open to, as we're learning about these sorts of things, look for opportunities to say, you know what, I think that in this problem that we're dealing with a customer, there may be ways to apply that stuff I heard about, quality improvement or human factors, or we'll talk a little later today about applied behavior analysis. I think that there's opportunities to apply that. And if you'd like somebody to talk it over with, I'm available. And there's other expert resources. So that's kind of an introduction to the program. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today then. These are the top, so of the key knowledge areas, what we're going to focus on today: determinants of health, human factors, and systems thinking. And the procedure, unlike what we've been doing so far, the procedure, what you can expect for the rest of the morning, is going to require engagement. We've got exercises, discussion, activities, those sorts of things. And please approach it with this idea. In fact, there'll be like trick questions. And they're deliberately trick questions. None of you has come here saying, I am an expert in these topics. So we're all learning here. Participate, engage. Just don't worry about getting the wrong answer, because you will get the wrong answer, because these are mostly trick questions. But the point is to get us engaged, to get us talking about it. So, and our goal mostly for this morning, beyond the learning, is for you to have fun. I think if you're having fun, you're more likely to learn, more likely to be interested in it. So we'll see if we can do that. So we're going to begin with systems thinking. Okay. At the heart of it, and what we're going to do today is just an introduction to systems thinking. There's a lot more. Every one of these topics, by the way, you can get advanced degrees in them. And we're not going to give you advanced degrees this morning, but introductions. And so I'm going to drill down on a couple of concepts that I think are really useful from systems thinking. One definitional element of systems. What is a system? A system is elements that interact to perform some purpose. And systems thinking, so that's the most general definition, okay? And that on its own isn't very useful. But what it does begin to introduce is cause and effect thinking. This is something that a discipline and tools and exercises within systems thinking that helps us deal with systems complexity more effectively. You will see, you're going to see, I hope, connections between systems thinking and the other two topics, determinants of health and human factors, throughout the morning. So we'll talk a little bit about systems thinking, and then we'll draw those connections throughout the morning. So one way that systems thinking works, or a discipline associated with it, is we use what I call pictures of ideas. So representations. We have a system, and we try to draw it or represent it so that, well, we'll talk more about how to the reasoning behind it. So there are some examples. We'll go through those a little bit and give you some ideas. But before we do, there's a question: why bother? Why bother making diagrams, representations, fault tree? You'll see this sort of thing of systems. And here's the why bother. The first way is we have another way to understand our world, okay? Beyond diagrams, that sort of thing. The main way we seek to understand our world is through storytelling, through narrative. When you're trying to explain an idea to somebody, you know what to do. You tell them about it. And in fact, there's structures to stories. They're very useful in many circumstances, but they fail us. And we don't realize it because they're so useful to us. They've served us well throughout our history. They fail us in some types of problem solving, where there's complex, where there's interactions, where the world isn't as linear. Stories actually help us where there's a linear world. This happened, and then this happened, that happened. When there's connections, it's harder to represent through stories. Imagine you were trying to do something as complex as build a house. And people do that, and their houses, we've solved that problem, right? But imagine you had to do it without blueprints. And you want to buy a house, you're telling the architect, here's what I like. The architect is telling the contractors, here's what to build. What's going to come out on the other end? Not the house that you had in mind, right? So that's the idea of thinking blueprints. It turns out that a lot of what we work with can be represented both by a story and in some sense more effectively through other mechanisms. That sort of work, moving from the story, the description, to the blueprint, helps us do something that doesn't seem to have any value at first. In fact, it sounds backwards. And the idea is it slows down the conversation. And what I mean by that is slowing down. Why would you bother slowing down a conversation? Because many conversations fail to communicate because the two parties don't recognize that they're not actually communicating. These sorts of things, these sorts of tools help create that conversation, help us be more explicit. And we are seeing, by the way, something that's come up in the last 8-10 years, that funders expect us, when we write a proposal, to have such representations, logic models, driver diagrams, that sort of thing. So here's some examples. What's called a fishbone diagram. Are people familiar with this? Have people seen this? Okay. Classic quality improvement tool. I never teach it. And I'll tell you why. Or at least I'll give you a metaphor that maybe gets at why. But I teach some related methods. I've never, but Ishikawa is much more well known than Mike Silver. so you might want to pay attention to him. But there's a reason I don't use it. What's the difference between a recipe and a list of ingredients?
A recipe gives direction.
Recipe gives direction. It provides additional structure. The list of ingredients is embedded in a recipe, but it doesn't tell you how to put it together. That's my critique of the fishbone diagram. All the stuff is there, but the relationships are not. So here's some basic tools on systems thinking, logic modeling. And the basic tools, and so I'm going to try another feature of this. I think there it is. Okay, is this one. You got two things connected by an arrow. What that is supposed to imply is that, at least I think, that B causes A. Okay? If B happens, then A will happen. There's another structure. This and this is connected. Okay? That's an AND feature. What that means is that if B and C happen, then A happens. B and C cause A. This structure is a little different. Either B can cause A or C can cause A. So we can get to A. If I've gotten to A, I suspect that either B has happened or C has happened. So those are some structures. What do you suppose that one means?
B is more likely to cause A than C is caused.
That's right. That's right. Either, yes, B or C can cause A, but
B is more likely.
B is more likely. B is a dominant driver here, or at least I believe so. That's because I made the arrow. Okay. All right. So why bother with this sort of thing? Again, because you don't need to bother with it all the time. But in many instances, this sort of thinking can highlight areas of where we have consensus and where we don't. We can make it more explicit. Here's an example. You may be familiar with this. We'll spend a minute on this. Let's find out. How many folks recognize the Institute for Healthcare Improvement's AAA? Okay, great. Who can describe it for me? Because not everybody raised their hand. Actually, I guess since I have the microphone, I'm supposed to describe it, right? All right, then I will. So this is what, some years ago, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, Don Berwick and colleagues, developed what they called the triple aim. And in this, they tried to describe what the goals are for improvement in the healthcare system in the United States today. And the goals are to simultaneously achieve population health, reduce per capita costs for healthcare, and improve the experience of care. Let's see. So, and that's the way they described it. It's been very useful. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is our board of directors in our ends policy has adopted a similar type of set of ends policies for us. Okay, so here's a question, maybe a trick question. We'll find out. Is this a logic model?
Does it look like it?
What's missing? It doesn't look like it for the people on the...
How is each one of those components are related?
There's no indication here about the relationship between those goals. In fact, to be fair to Dr. Berwick and colleagues, they didn't propose that this was a logic model. So they didn't say this is our logic model. So if we find that it's not a critique, because they never claimed it was. Is it a logic model now? It's actually, so what I've done two things. I've just put in arrows, two-headed arrows where there used to be just connecting lines, and so you can contrast. This was just lines and something there in the middle, which is, I guess, the goal. And I've reversed it. So instead of having the aims, I have the not what we want, but what we're getting. So this is, in fact, the way this is framed, this is called a current reality way of documenting something. So these are the undesired effects of our system. The undesired effects is we have in the United States poor health, avoidable disease. We have healthcare quality is less than adequate, and we pay too much. Okay? But then, so I've reversed that idea. And then arrows, two-headed arrows between each of those undesired effects. Now, what do you suppose, what would you think that a two-headed arrow implies?
It's both ways.
The causality goes both ways, okay? It also, I would assert, implies that if you don't do anything else, the strength of association is equal. That the healthcare cost too high causes poor health in the same magnitude that poor health causes healthcare costs to be too high. And that healthcare quality is less than adequate is equally causal. The direction, not only the direction, but the magnitude goes both ways. What if I wasn't comfortable with that assertion? I could do something like this. I could break it apart. I could say, yes, causality goes both ways, but this arrow might be thicker than that arrow. So if anybody's following along in their notes could see where this is going. Where's it going? Where it's going is a critique of this is the beginnings of a logic model. And a critique that you could make is, all right, I believe you. I believe you that somehow poor health, avoidable disease impacts healthcare costs. Or more, let's just start with this one. So this is an outcome, undesired effect. Poor health, avoidable disease is an outcome that I care about. This model right now says that it has two causes. Here they are. Healthcare quality is less than adequate, and healthcare costs are too high. What do you think? Does that completely describe the causes of poor health and avoidable disease in the United States? Is there something missing?
Other factors.
Okay. Is there something missing? Very good. Okay. Does it matter? Okay, so we could always name some obscure, people don't look both ways before they cross the street, right? And that's not on here. And that could cause poor health, right? So, which is not that obscure. We run over a lot of people in Salt Lake City. We're in Las Vegas as well. But so in logic modeling, the trick is not to load these things up with trivia. But if there's something material, something substantive that's not on this, then we better have it on our model. And so does that meet does other stuff meet your criteria, that criteria? Is it important? Yes. Yes. Okay, good, because we've got it on the next slide. and that's the nature, that's one of the ways we critique logic models. We can say, yeah, it's correct. I can appreciate that this can cause this, and I can appreciate that this can cause this, but there's something else missing. And right now, it's very generic. Okay? All right. That brings us to an activity that we're going to spend a couple of minutes on together. And that activity is over there. Okay, so for people that can't see it, because you'll all be walking up there, I guess the pointer works with that as well, doesn't it? Just don't point it toward the airport, right? Okay. All right. This is a diagram of this sort of thing. And what we're going to do, because right now our logic model, our beginning of what is described as a current reality tree, has this characteristic. All the arrows are the same thickness. And there's a possibility that that's not how we understand the world. Okay? So each of these, poor health, avoidable disease, has 3 arrows going into it. Other causes, healthcare quality less than adequate, and healthcare costs too high. All of those we propose are potential contributors. What we're going to do is each one of you, we're going to go up there and you're going to tell me how thick you think each of those arrows should be. There are 9 arrows total. Okay? And the way you will be expressing your opinion is the total score that you get for the 3 arrows that go into each one of these is 10. Okay? So poor health, avoidable disease, you distribute your 10 points between other causes here, healthcare quality less than adequate, and healthcare costs too high. And you put a dot, there's markers under the holiday tree over there. And if you put a dot, doesn't matter what color you use, put a dot next to your vote. And so you're going to be grading 9 different arrows. Does any of that make sense besides the holiday tree? Okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. So look it over, and if you can't see it from where you are, come back and take a look at the results we're seeing. All right, now I will remind you that our board of directors has charged us to work on these topics. This is embedded in our ends policy. We have ends policies that parallel each of these undesired effects. We're working on that. So what are you seeing there? What impression do you get? What do you think what are you taking from this so far? Go ahead.
In respect of every individual, it has different, each one has their own perspective.
We have a variety of perspectives here, yes. Yes.
That is influenced by your exposure to life.
So the variation we see here could be a result of the different experience of the people that have been asked to weigh in on this. Okay? What else? Anything else?
A lot of us do agree that there are a lot of other causes, so they did give them some higher marks.
So there's substantial, in many of these, there's some substantial outside of this model's other causes influence that we're seeing. So if I care about poor health and avoidable disease, at least there's some degree of consensus that the answers aren't just here and here. We have to look elsewhere as well. Although the degree of that, in this one, for example, there's some difference of opinion there. Does that, do such differences of opinion, different perspectives, do they impact our ability to work together effectively?
No, they do. No.
They don't or they do? They can or they might?
They might.
They might have positive
And negative.
They might have, how could they have positive influence on our ability to work together?
Because we all bring in different perspectives to make sure that those other perspectives, oh, did you think about this? Did you think about that?
So if I'm a 3 here, and there's a couple things I can think. One is, boy, those ones, they don't really know what they're doing. But I could also say, you know what? I wonder what those 8s know that I don't know. Potentially. Right? So maybe. What negatives might this have?
We can't agree on what to do.
We can't agree on what to do, and without this type of tool, we don't even know that we don't agree. Right? So I'll wonder, if I'm a 2 here and an 8 there, and you're the other way around, I'm wondering why you're spending all your time on that. It doesn't matter that much. It's the 8 that matters, not the 2. But if we don't agree, but we've never even surfaced the fact that we don't agree, then we'll disparage each other. There's at least the potential we won't work together effectively. This is that sort of thing to highlight those potential differences and similarities is one of the reasons I recommend developing these types of tools. When I'm working with, so we use this sort of thing when we're working with big teams working on complex problems and things like this for prioritization, so they all understand what they're doing. So what were the elements of setting up this process that you saw here? What did you see? So this was an activity, an exercise for us. It's revealed that we have a range of perspectives. Our analysis has told us that might come from different experience, different ways of framing the problems and that sort of thing. And it's given us the raw material to have what I think potentially a productive dialogue about the relative contribution of these sorts of things. How could you apply this type of exercise in your work? Actually, I'm going to go ahead. Yeah.
In our work, we are nurses and we go to different facilities.
Okay.
And sometimes, because we are the outsiders,
Okay.
it will be a great tool to go in there and find out, assess. I mean, what are they thinking? What do they need? What do they want? So it's a great exercise, and I was just jotting it down because I'm going to use that.
Okay. So, and the steps are to begin with some consensus, or some, even if not even consensus, proposed undesired effects. So just so we can be clear that that we have a similar goal here, and that's the undesired effects. So that's the first step, is to name those, and then to start articulating what we think are the causes. Now, I cheated in this one. I used Don Berwick's causes and just put a generic label out here. There's a lot more work. Since we found that there's some interest in these other causes, we got to define them a little more specifically than that, right? I mean, it's just not very actionable. So yes, there's other stuff. So those are the processes. And then in this particular instance, we didn't make everybody vote, anonymously. It was an open process, hoping that the first person with a marker wouldn't influence the other people too strongly. And then our next steps from this would be dialogue about the implications of these sorts of things. That is it, what can we learn about the variation? So we might have to learn a little bit, well, in this case, we'd have to actually explore what are the other causes. We got to articulate them better. And then to find out how much of it is just different ways I framed the question. It's like, well, I work all day with this population, and this is what, I see. And then you can say, well, yes, I work with a different population. So it's not, we don't have different perspectives. We're framing the question a different way, that sort of thing. So that's and we'll work on some other stuff. Go ahead.
Another element will be to even go more into defining more specifically what we say is poor health, avoidable disease.
Okay.
Because those, the scores might be different if the poor health itself, and we're talking about, adverse health effects of drugs, or are we talking about, right, I don't know, dying from cancer? Maybe the score that we gave to the healthcare cost for the cancer one is going to be much higher than the adverse health.
Right. Okay. Outstanding. And that's exactly right. And yet, when the folks that are familiar with the triple aim, you heard it 3, 4, 5 years ago. That's the point of slowing down the conversation. Until you do this sort of thing, you don't really start pulling it apart and say, what are the implications for our work if we're headed toward that? For example, let me give you an example. So let's see. So I'm looking at the causes of healthcare costs being too high, provided by a group of experts. Congratulations. And what am I seeing? And these are an informed group that work with healthcare providers all the time and have some knowledge of this. If I care about this outcome, and lots of us do, right? Care quality less than adequate does not seem to be a dominant driver. To me, at least our consensus, most people give it either a 2 or a 3. The larger driver is poor health, avoidable disease, which itself seems to be mostly driven by other causes, not poor healthcare quality, at least in our assessment. So if I care about this, where do I look for root causes? I look out here. Yeah, it's not contained, if you will, within the triple aim, and that is that's an important and useful finding. We get paid a lot of money to do this sort of thing at HealthInsight, and for good reason. It's a valuable goal in its own right, but recognizing, at least from our own perspective, we don't think that that's going to produce this outcome. At least not very reliably. So that's introduction, a part of systems thinking. How do we apply this? Oh, thank you. Literally, when I work with teams, and I get to do this a lot, I invest the time to do this type of work. I develop a blueprint or a logic model, something so where we can have explicit conversations about these types of things within a project. And then we invest in these as what we call living documents, so that project, it's not unusual projects we work on to extend over 2 or 3 years. We revisit it. We make it part of the team's processes. So that's the applications of that. Other thoughts, questions, comments? Jerry?
If you add emotion to this equals conflict. It's like the root causes of conflict because there's such highly variable opinions.
Right.
But if you emotionally are very strongly advocating that it's my 8, it's not your 2.
Right.
And you add that, and you can see that with sometimes providers feel like everybody is piling up on them as the reason that care is poor or costs are high. Or you can do that for each part of this equation, and it adds to a lot of intensity of emotion and interpersonal conflict.
Right. Right. So what you're highlighting is at the end of the day, these sorts of things produce more than just a dot on a piece of paper. It in fact might impact the actions or the priorities or where resources get allocated for a group. So in some sense, this is just that first step. We would have to have rules by which we're going to resolve, for the purposes of this project or this initiative, is it a 2 or is it an 8? And those are future steps there. You're exactly right, because sometimes that becomes people are emotionally invested in it. It becomes political issues and things like that. Yep. Go ahead.
The other step that we need to take a step further is to supplement our perception by data. You don't just come with a 2 or an 8.
Right.
So you have to back it up by some type of research.
Right. So one ground rule, if one could say, okay, so how are we going to resolve this? One method is, where there is meaningful variance of opinion here, we're going to go out and get some data. We're going to study this. Or if one doesn't have any data, you can go into it knowing, I don't know today whether it's a 2 or 8, but we can design rapid cycle learning processes by which we can resolve this. We can learn more in the next 6 months about those sorts of things. Please.
Would you not also need to identify areas that we have no influence over?
Yep.
For example, with healthcare costs being too high, in my opinion, one of the causes of that is greed.
Okay.
Well, there's nothing we can do about that.
Okay. The idea is, what you're bringing forward is, I don't have to agree with you to have a useful dialogue about that. That is explicit part of this, is to say, okay, what are the causes and which of those, there's two assumptions there. What are the causes and whether those causes are within or outside of our control. And the idea is to make it explicit so that you're not sitting on one side of the table with this mental model, with your mental model, and I'm not sitting on mine, and we never discover that we're not working together effectively because we haven't surfaced those. Yes, thank you.